Hello, I'm Mark Baer. You're watching Conversations and Collaborations. I'm with King Grossman, novelist, poet. Welcome.
Hey Mark, how you doing today?
So again, we all went out to the field in Carmel Valley. You were there helping with our drone shot, so it was a great collaborative effort.
Well, it's been fun for me to be a part of just in the peanut gallery as a friend of yours, as you have done this magnificent work of art, and I guess it's been a couple of year project or
Several year project.
several year
Yes.
project, and I've gotten to see it kind of at different. You've given me bird's eye views of it from time to time.
And then every time you come out, I'll steal something, one of your ideas.
Well, I don't know. Well, wasn't it Picasso that said
Yeah.
that
Good artists steal,
Yeah,
mediocre artists borrow.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, go for it.
But,
No kidding. And so yes, but being able to see that, and then for you to invite me out for that day here recently, a beautiful sunny day, and then to have all of those paintings that we took them and put them in the open air and on the ground, and then to do some great shots of those, both with drones and aerial shots, and then all.
So anyway, your involvement much appreciated, and one of the lines that I definitely stole from you is "May this heart lead to a deeper heart," and that's the crux of this is King's last novel. This is Letters to Alice, has a modern day component, and then the Dr. Zhivago Russian.
Yeah, it tracks basically in novel form. It tracks Boris Pasternak writing Dr. Zhivago, the seminal work of that area of Stalinist Russia, and then getting it smuggled out into the West for publication. And that part of it pretty much tracks history. And then there's a couple of New York writers, and it all overlaps. And I love that book. I'm very glad I wrote it.
Won some prizes.
And it's won several awards: the National Indie Excellence Award, the National eBook Award, because it's also out in ebook, and others for literary fiction, and I won for visionary fiction as well, a category called visionary fiction.
So we're putting this down.
Yeah, put that down.
So we got new stuff cooking, and let's talk about the new book.
Let's do it.
Okay, so where are we?
Well, this book is called Ishmael Scroll, and the reason I wrote it, I can remember when I got the idea for it. It was right after 9/11, actually. I've written 2 novels since I got the idea for this book, and I knew I wanted to write this book at some point in time. And the mythic heart of this book is about why am I writing this book? It's because I really perceive that religion, as it's been manipulated through the ages by the powers that be, whatever religion, is the stakes the heat is being turned up higher and higher on that in contemporary world events and contemporary culture. And the stakes for doing this, it seems to me, are being turned up higher and higher. I mean, used to, 200 years ago, 100 years ago, even 75 years ago and 50 years ago, all that terrible manipulation of religion by the powers that be. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking down religion. In fact, I'm a person of faith. I'm saying, how do we actually use religion to find healing and love and resurrection and transcendence?
And not divisiveness.
And not divisiveness, and then manipulated these emotions around religion to justify violence and war, whether it be personal violence, one on against another, or whether it be, nation states at war. And so the stakes are higher. Why? Because now all the weaponry is everybody's got the weapons of mass destruction. So it's not like it was where you go out and, okay, that's terrible, whatever, 2,000 people meet in a field and club each other to death. That's insane. But now we're talking about literally putting millions, if not billions, of lives at risk. So I think one of the real challenges for humankind is to transcend these religious differences into cooperation. And so how, you know, not, I really take on the idea of and explore against it the idea of toleration. I think you don't tolerate. I think we have to literally risk that our belief system is wrong. Maybe it's right, but it's all, we have to risk that it's wrong, and we have to talk with others that can sit there and have that same kind of conversation with us, whatever that religion is, or of none. I would make the argument that humanism, secular humanism, that doesn't take into account a deity beyond what you can see. Therefore, the deity is not taken into account. Is still a religion. Okay, it's a belief system. It's a way of looking at the world. And so, yeah, transcending these things into where we're actually, let's say, worshiping together in different ways.
So you come up with an idea.
Yeah, so that's why
you've had the idea for a long time. Now you have to put those in humans'
terms. I have to have a story, and I want to talk a little bit about where I really knew I wanted to write this book. I knew at that moment. It hasn't changed. It was right after 9/11. My mom at the time had a stroke, and me and my family had built an apartment adjacent to my house. You connected to it, and I was over there, and she had caregivers. And this caregiver had been to church, and this was right after 9/11. And she came home and she said, the pastor had just done this sermon on the woolly tribe of Ishmael. And I said, the woolly tribe of Ishmael? I said, tell me about that. She said, well, those are the Arabs, those are the Muslims. And I knew right then that this divisiveness was being sowed. And in the Bible, there is the woolly tribe of Ishmael spoken of, and there again, it can all be manipulated. And I knew that moment that the woolly tribe of Ishmael needed to be exalted and used in a story in a way that we come together and transcend versus do this separation and demonization. I knew at that moment, and from there I began developing the outline for the story, and it just kind of, I feel like it's a timely time to write it, and I'm writing it. I'm almost done with it.
So where, and again, you've used the historical double story.
This time, so what I've done is I am, and I've told my wife, I said, the next book I write, do not let me write one of these parallel stories with a contemporary story and a historical story. Not that I don't enjoy it. It's just, that's 2 in a row. I didn't plan on it being 2 in a row. It's just the way the story needs to be written. The next one ain't going to be that way. All right? But anyway, in this one, and I want to say the first one was actually historical. As I said, it tracked the literary history in Stalinist Russia of Pasternak writing, Dr. Zhivago getting smuggled out of the West. This is historically based, but it's theologically based. So I really draw an asterisk around saying that Christian history is actual history. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't to some extent. I mean, but it's what we accept in the theology of these times. So what I do is I take Jesus figure, Isho in Aramaic, and I take him at about the age of 17 to about the age of 22 or 3, and I imagine what would have radicalized this person to do the things that that he was attributed to have done in the scriptures, and not in the sense of actually having done all those things, but being attributed to have done them. This person walking around, what would have radicalized them to do that? And so I imagine what that was, and I do that on purpose, and I really like this concept of the book. I think one of the big problems with Christian theology is, we take this Jesus figure, and it's almost like he's a magical person that, bong, and is perfect and makes all these perfect decisions, and well, that's not human, and yet divine, the divine intermixed with that. And so what would have actually shaped this person to make some divine moves, if you will, okay? And so that's what I'm interested in. And that makes,
So how did you research this?
oh my God, I've read so much. Albert Schweitzer and all those and writing about the historical Jesus, and there was a whole body of theologians trying to actually say, wait a minute, what can we actually know about the historical Jesus? Also, Elaine Pagels in more recent work, she's done great work with this, with the Gnostic Gospels and the Nag Hammadi, and I've also read a ton on the Dead Sea Scrolls and what was, and then others that you get into. It's highly likely that Jesus didn't write and either wasn't literate to write, or didn't want the stories written down, wanted them verbal, because this was the tradition of verbal storytelling, because it allows, that's where the parables, it allows the hearer to be a part of interpreting that and creating with it, and then you're in a divine, you're not only in a human relationship, you're now connecting with the divine and working with. And so one of the things I develop as one of the threads in the story is this Ishmael character is a verbalizer and doesn't want it written down. And once he sees it being written down, he sees how it's manipulated. It's again turned into, rather than a...
And it's frozen.
It's frozen, yeah. And therefore it can be taken by the powers that be and manipulated and interpreted for their purposes, whether it be organized church or the state or whatnot. And so he was for not having it written down in my book, which also there's a body of theology that would say that's likely, okay? And his best friend is this Arab dude named Wasim in my book, again, the woolly tribe of Ishmael, and Wasim is his scribe. And there's a big body of knowledge in theology that would say there's probably was a source document, a Q document. It's called Q because in German the word for source starts with Q. Because in the Christian scriptures there are these sayings that appear in the different books that were written in different times and at different places and probably without knowledge of the other. And so there's this belief that there's probably a source document, that someone wrote down these things, not in story form, more like, wow, that was cool, I'm going to write that down, that quote, when he said that. And Wasim is this best friend who writes this stuff down. And Jesus Ishmael doesn't want him to. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, no, we need just these, maybe I'm a poet, maybe I'm not, but don't write this stuff down, because as soon as you do, he says, oh, it's too cool, I'm going to write it down anyway. And so from there, the Q document is developed in my book. And then the name of the book, as I told you, is Ishmael Scroll. And when, in my book, when the Romans actually move on their compound, and the compound is Qumran, and it's also believed where the Essenes hung out, which is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were actually found. And it's conjectured that it's likely that Ishmael hung out there with the Essenes, because the Essenes were the group that saw the Jewish established religion and the Roman, occupying powers they saw the Romans successfully co-opting the Jewish religion and the hierarchy there. And these were the men and women that said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go out here and we're going to create something else. And they were open to evolving and not co-opting. They weren't trying to go back and do it the old way and hold on to the old way. They were saying, let's hold on to what's best, but let's be open. And that's why you have all these scrolls out there.
I'm Mark Baer. You're watching Conversations and Collaborations. I'm with King Grossman. We're going to be right back.
You are watching Conversations and Collaborations. For all episodes, go to markdavidbaer.com.
Hello, I'm Mark Baer. I'm with King Grossman. This is Conversations and Collaborations, and we left off in the Dead Sea.
Yes, right. And so as the Romans move on Qumran, which is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were, and the Essenes hung out, and they got those scrolls over to the caves. This is history. I mean, this is actual. We know because we found the scrolls in the caves, and we know, and the compounds there, and there's evidence that the Romans actually did move on it militarily. So when this happens in the book, in my book, they really do think they're about to be wiped out. They really do think there's not much future for any of them, and so Isho acquiesces to Wassam, and they decide to write a scroll that is called Ishmael Scroll, again for the woolly tribe of Ishmael, to turn the, and I'm not going to tell you what's in that. I want readers to read the book to find out what's in it. But this is this integrating scroll, and he wrote it reluctantly. Had Wassam write it reluctantly as they collaborated to do it, and also bring in Mary Magdalene, because it's again. Part of my one thread of this book is to undo patriarchy, and so she's part of this scroll, and it's Ishmael Scroll. Okay.
So that's the back historical story.
Let's call it the attributed history.
Attributed history. And let's talk about the secondary story.
So, well, it's not the parallel, because it actually is the story that's going to then. Why does this matter today? Yes. And so if there was an A and a B, this would actually be A, but they're both got to be A. So in the contemporary storyline, there's my protagonist is Hatham, who was named after Hatham, who science and the scientific process was actually. History shows that it was actually started in the Arabic world. Now Hatham's not Arabic; he's an Caucasian English ancestor, American, but he is a paleographer, and a paleographer is that's the science and the art of authenticating ancient documents. Okay, he's in his 30s, and his dad. Will have been one of the key members of that actually did authenticate the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, now there is also a body of knowledge that is highly likely that not all of the Dead Sea Scrolls were brought forward; that some of them were held back. We can all conjecture why. Again, if you've got these religious systems and these governmental systems, and there's something that's poignant that they found that might threaten that. Might it be held back? And there is a good amount of conjecture that some were held back. Well, his father will have been a part of the team that authenticated the scrolls and discovered, it went in after the discovery was made and authenticated them. And he will have held back Ishmael's scroll. And so Hatham discovers the Q document. He doesn't know that his father's withheld Ishmael's scroll. And so you can imagine, here's the son wanting the truth out and the father wanting the truth to be withheld.
So you've got an interesting
and I'm
conflict.
not going to tell you.
I'm not going to go farther
I'm
than
not
that.
going to tell anybody
How it works.
how that is reconciled.
So anyway, first I want to thank you because you never talk about work in progress.
Well,
so this is
and I'm nervous right now.
Yeah,
doing
this is work in progress, and so
it is. I'm down to the last bit of it, and then it'll all be polished. But that gets into the creative process.
So let's talk about the creative process. There is no shortcut, is there?
There's none. I mean, it's read. You know, the basic way to do it is very simple. It's read, write. If you want to be a writer, you read, and you write. That's it. End of sentence. That's the formula. You better love to read, and you better love to write. And I do. And so then how each author develops their own style, their own creative process, well, that's as individual as there are authors, and writers. And it's fun for me when I talk to other writers how they do it. Just not to try to do it like them, just how do you get to it? And then you kind of, but I know authors that they don't start a novel until they've outlined it in detail. John Irving spends 18 months or more outlining a novel, then he writes it in a shorter period of time than that oftentimes, sometimes not, but he knows right where he's going. He actually starts them from the back and writes them to the front. That's how well he knows his story before he starts to write.
Ken Follett's the same way as a storyteller. And we'll get to the difference between storytellers and poets, or the combination thereof, because they're not the same thing.
They're not the same thing, and I'm interested in the poetic novel.
So
that's what I write.
You and I come from the poetic background, and the storytelling. I never really looked at that as closely as I'm looking at good storytellers now. It's easy as a writer to be snobbish about the storyteller.
Well, you can be, but then again,
you realize how what it takes to be a good storyteller as well.
It is an incredible skill, and then of course poetry is also, but poetry gives you the freedom to let the subconscious play more, and so. This is,
language.
Well, and epic poems are stories as well. And so, and that is a genre, the epic poem. But how do you, what I'm interested in doing is yes, taking, becoming the best storyteller I can possibly be. Beginning, middle, end, dramatic beats.
Yes.
Okay? But then writing in a style that is all my own. I'm not trying to write in a poetic style. I am a poet. I'm a published. I've written 600 plus poems. I'm a poet.
So the single sentence becomes more important. So I think let's step back a second and just kind of talk about, like when I talk about Ken Follett. Well,
yes.
Ken Follett was never my favorite writer. Because it's not, the language isn't exquisite. The storytelling and the history
is very good.
Is exquisite, and the ability to keep tension is quite amazing.
That's right.
And I didn't read earlier in my life. I didn't really look at those things as amazing things. I was, I was more, I'm just looking at, we grew up on Hemingway, where each sentence was like compressed and compacted. Each sentence itself.
And yet he managed to be poetic.
He not only did he manage to be poetic, but he managed to be a great storyteller.
Both.
But the word, each word was weighed out and thought out and balanced and magical. And that's kind of a little bit of what the difference between literary fiction is and
well, it is. I mean, but then Hemingway. I mean, then you could take you could take Proust, or you could take Faulkner, or you could take that use a lot of words.
Language.
But it's still, every word is important.
But exactly. But it's still very literary writing versus just straight storytelling.
Yes, the song of the writing is as important as the story. And Colin McCann, who's won all sorts of awards, wrote some great novels, and Let the Great World Spin is one of my favorites. He says that actually language does carry the novel, that it is the most important part of a novel. And he's not a particularly florid writer, but his writing is very moving, very poignant, somewhat poetic. And this is what he says about the novel. And, I don't even know if I agree with that. What I think is both have to be there. Yeah. The song has to carry you forward as well as the story, and draw you in.
So I love the words, and I'm trying now to learn how do these guys that write master fiction, even popular commercial fiction, how do they do it? And and then bring that into.
Are you talking about from a storytelling standpoint?
From a storytelling aspect, and then bring that into.
Well, but see,
bring that into the world of the poet.
I'm with you, but I have my experience has given me a strong opinion about that. Yeah. I think your voice is your voice, and if it happens to be a poetic voice, so be it.
Yes.
okay? And you develop it, certainly, by read, write. But you can't, I don't believe, you can teach that voice. You can enhance it.
But you can learn about
But this is where I'm going.
Yeah.
Story
Story
is
you can
something you
learn.
can learn about.
That's what my point is.
You can learn that.
That's what I'm learning.
And it is very clearly the structure, you know, and then so to know those rules so that you can choose why you're breaking them if you decide to. I mean, Thomas Pynchon's one of my favorite writers. He breaks the rules. He also has a great story. He writes nonlinear oftentimes.
But his storytelling is getting better.
Well, his storytelling, I would submit it's always been good.
Yeah.
He has decided to break those rules for a reason. If you want to keep the reader up in this firmament and not let them have their feet on solid ground, and on purpose keep them in that uncomfortable mystery that will, if it's written well, draw them in. And I submit to you, he was consciously trying to do that in Gravity's Rainbow. In other words, it wasn't a mistake. He knew how to tell a story. He was consciously keeping you up here in this nonlinear space.
I just finished The Bleeding Edge.
And The Bleeding Edge is more of a story.
Yeah.
It's more linear.
But so it's interesting how he brought the linear, but the language is all there, the big vision is all there.
Right. Oh, no, and it's still all there.
But the actual storytelling is getting tighter.
Well, I would say this. I don't know Thomas Pynchon, but I would be interested to know whether he feels he is evolving into a tighter storyteller, or if he knew how to do that with Gravity's Rainbow, for example, but decided not to and said, this one fits this. And so, a Bleeding Edge, for example, and I'm going to make it a tighter story, and yet still have those mind-blowing great literary riffs in it.
And anyway, knowing your work, you are becoming a better storyteller, and it's just so.
Well, you evolve as a writer. I mean, and your voice gets clearer and deeper, and your storytelling skills get sharper. And I just think that, you know, there's an axiom there that you know, you'll know whether you're a novelist and whether you're a storyteller, and what your style is, whether you're poetic or more linear, on your third novel. And I actually found that to be true. You know, I hated hearing that when I was on my first and second novel, but I actually have to say I found it to be true. I mean, when I wrote my third novel, it was the first time I felt like I wasn't writing like anybody else. I was writing like me.
Okay, I'm going to leave us there. All right. Conversations, Collaborations. I'm with King Grossman. I'm Mark Baer. We will be back. See you later.